Good morning. Last sharing, I talked about the Heart Sutra and the Heart Sutra, how the Heart Sutra was the culmination, was the pinnacle, was the perfection of Buddha's Dharma. And it's held as the most sacred text by Buddhists even today. And all around the world, they chant this daily. They chant this sutra daily. Some parts of the world in Chinese, other parts of the world in Sanskrit, are the language of the Buddha at his time and his physical incarnation. And talked about at the crux of the matter, the heart of the matter of the Heart Sutra was the reconciliation of opposites, diametrically, complete 180 degree opposite, polar opposites of reality, the so-called duality of the us, them, me, you, mine, yours. This dichotomy, this split, and much earlier, the Vedic Upanishad, 4,000 to 5,000 years BC, where they started dealing and they started talking about non-duality, recognizing that even so-called opposites or measurements that appeared opposite could be equally true. And I mentioned for me how this was the culmination of my awakening 2 or 3 day experience. This was the cosmic joke when I could look at free will, I could look at preordained or destiny, and look at preordained and destiny. Yes, everything is preordained. It's all destiny. That's all there is. Yes, free will exists. In fact, it's pervasive. It's all there is. So yes, and yes, without explosion, or worse yet, implosion, come within. I think rather make my mess outside than make my mess internally. But maybe that's just me. No, I think most of you would be in my corner on that better to dirty the walls than to dirty the interior. But it turns out that psychologists, fairly recent in this time when psychology was recognized as a science. At first, it was best thought of as a soft science. Anything that's not physically demonstrable was not considered hard science. So even today, I think they still talk about soft science and hard science. But thank God for quantum physics, where this blurred. Not only did it blur, but it harkened back to the earliest words of the even pre-Vedic scholars. Vedas were first, Upanishads followed up. But these concepts were thought about, quantum physics especially, is validating, if it's indeed was even necessary, but validating to the Western, to the Western mind. Rational, we might say. But to me, rationality is totally irrational. It's irrational to be rational. And again, there's opposites that I can entertain. Yeah. Irrational, certainly. Rational, of course. Chaos and order. Yes, the world is chaos. Yet the world is ordered exquisitely. Ordered. So I went to look up cognitive dissonance, and I wanted to read to you a little bit about what Wikipedia told me. My go-to. If I wanted to skim the surface, I go to Wikipedia. And if I want to go deeper, of course, there's sources that I can go back and go deeper. Go back and read the original text as best I can. Language challenges fully taken into account, so I can read translations. Probably translations of translations of translations, which biblical scholars, sincere biblical scholars, unbiased biblical scholars, will say that the Bible that some hold to be the precious words to be accepted verbatim had been through maybe at least 30 transitions. And having just watched the discrepancy between English and Chinese and this translation back and forth and what's lost, just times that by 30. And I think the Bible is a beautiful parable to be considered, to be taken in the spirit of guidance, the spirit of historical sharing, but literally stretches my credibility. I'm wrestling with words again. Credible. I'm going to go look it up. Don't worry, I'll get it to you. Or maybe it'll come to me. Crude. Something crude. It means in the realms of disbelief. So this cognitive dissonance occurs when a person holds contrary beliefs, ideas, or values, and is typically experienced as psychological stress when they participate in an action that goes against one or more of them. According to this theory, when two actions or ideas are not psychologically consistent with each other, people do all in their power to change them until they become consistent. The discomfort is triggered by the person's belief clashing with new information perceived when they try to find a way to resolve contradiction to reduce their discomfort. In 1957, in the theory of cognitive dissonance, Leon Festinger proposed that human beings strive for internal psychological consistency to function mentally in the real world. A person who experiences internal inconsistency tends to become psychologically uncomfortable and is motivated to reduce the cognitive dissonance. They tend to make changes to justify the stressful behavior, either by adding new parts to the contradictory information, likely to increase the magnitude of the cognitive dissonance. Confirmation bias, they call it. Coping with the nuances of contradictory ideas or experiences is mentally stressful. It requires energy and effort to sit with those seemingly opposite things that all seem true. Kissinger argued that some people would inevitably resolve dissonance by blindly believing whatever they wanted to believe. So I guess this is kind of to support my sharing that this was the great belly laugh to recognize that non-duality was the essence, was the all. And that duality just led to separation, division, construction of the ego itself. To enhance the difference. This is me, that's you. So this is what made it the great joke. When you're able to sit with something that psychologically stressful, when you're able to elasticize, your mind becomes like silly putty in that you can stretch and bend. It's flexible. And most of us tend to be so inflexible. And in the obvious confrontation with concepts that seem to be opposite concepts that seem to be equally so, we'll go out of our way to either ignore, change, modify, one of those above. And I'm thinking of the Trump supporters when they watch the evangelicals and they watch anything but Christian behaviors and words and messages. But somehow they manage to maybe hold their nose and vote for him anyway because he's their best hope. They're so afraid of what they see as progressive and change, what represents threatens a change in their worldview, their self-concept. So people have this amazing ability to compartmentalize, to ignore that which doesn't fit into their chosen narrative. And it's not even choosing the lessers of two evils. I know a lot of voters looked at Hillary and looked at Trump, and because Trump was more of an unknown at that time in 2016, and Hillary was maybe all too well known, that was a choice of what appeared to be the lesser evils. But time has proven that, of course, we have no idea what would have been like if Hillary would have been elected, but I know from experience it would have been more of the same. The sameness that Joe Biden represents, the blandness, the middle of the road. The inordinate influences of lobbies. the fact that big government, big money rules, and even though we pay homage to the little guy is essentially ignored. But at least you can recline in the boredom, the continuity. And this guy stirred it all up in a very unpleasant, he brought the worst out of us all. So I welcome the blandness, the mediocrity, and I decry the influence of business and lobbies, particularly the NRA, the National Rifle Association, but all the rest, Big Pharma, who literally buy and literally own this country. I decry that. But maybe this is my cognitive dissonance, that I can kind of, I don't ignore it because I'm all too aware of it. But it's become part of business as normal. All the better part of me cries for equality, cries for to heal the disparity of the haves and the have-nots, to take from those that have been so greedy and taken so much and distribute it to those that have been trod upon for all too long. So we see that this cognitive dissonance, it's a big deal. And it's the gateway. It's the last gateway to awakening. It's kind of a guard. It serves to limit those who haven't reached the point, who haven't gotten strong enough or flexible enough or insightful enough or disciplined enough to be able to entertain what non-duality truly means. They're the gatekeepers. And who knows what faculty, what ability allows one to finally get the cosmic joke, to understand that it's not separation, it's not division. There's no me, there's no you. And in the most transcendent sense, there's no us. There just is. And again, that's a leap that you might take after you've gotten the cosmic joke, after you've awakened it into abiding, permanent awareness, that you can even eliminate the us, to truly expand Maya, to push it to its limits, to push it to its boundaries and beyond. Elusive nature of our conscious perception of the order of things is constantly under an active attack as the post-awakening stages are incorporated. And then you take it beyond that, you start to become aware that it's not static. You should have known this by now, but there's a tendency, because we've reached a plateau, there's a tendency to think of it static. Okay, I'm there. Here I am. But what about the question, now what? Now what? Going to rest on your laurels? That was always puzzled me about the concept of heaven that seems so boring. I'm going to sit with the angels playing a harp and singing on floating on clouds? Well, how long does that take before it gets to become tedious? Before that inkling comes in, hey, I wonder what's going on down in the other realms, the lower realms. It might be more exciting or more offering an opportunity to engage, no matter if the engagement is an unpleasant or untenable condition. So that's when you realize this post-awakening is when you realize that when you awaken, when you shed your karma and you shed your karmic debt to reincarnate, to work on that karma, you've reached a plateau. But it's really kindergarten. That's what I'm becoming aware of. The Buddha state, the initial Buddha state, is kindergarten. I saw it as infancy, as a newborn, naked, cold, alone baby taking my first breaths, seeing my first visions. So there's a continuity. And this becomes more aware in what I call maturing Buddhahood. As you are constantly challenged, no resting on your laurels. In fact, there's a literal understanding that your achievements to date, if you want to use that word, in the scheme of things, are minimal. That's where ordinariness comes to. We're all Buddhas in stages of awakening. And that continues, that awakening. We call it permanent awakening and abiding awakening because once you've gotten the cosmic choke, once you've experienced whatever your experience are in that period leading up to becoming permanently awakened, there's no going back. You're awake and that's it. You can't go back to sleep. Even though there'll be periods of times and tribulations when you might long for that, the innocence of being asleep, because your responsibilities geometrically grow with your understanding, with your maturity. And there's some hard choices coming up. The first being is, do I just keep going? Or do I choose to reincarnate, come back to the earthly plane, karma-free, fully awakened, to help all sentient beings in their spiritual progression, in their spiritual realization. Buddha, indeed, pleaded with us that we do so. And I've already made that choice. I'll come back again and maybe be able to reach more than I have in these last few years of my own permanent awakening. So you have to resolve cognitive dissonance, and not by ignoring, choosing. Compartmentalizing is something that I know I would do. When there wasn't something that I wanted to think about, I would put it away and seal it and throw away the key, or so I thought. But that area where I compartmentalize, and I point to the brain, I don't know, it could be in the heart, could be in my finger, I don't know where I put these things, or where we put these things that we wish to remain separate from. And now I see that it doesn't fit in. It's a dissonance, it's a disruption of our cognitive experience. It flies in the face of, it appears to contradict. And it's interesting that you have to become more malleable, more flexible, least resistant, more inclusive. And these are not easy accomplishments. So that's why I think it's relief. The cosmic laugh, the big joke that everything is one. There's no separation or division. There's only unity. And even that unity becomes inconsequential because there's no labels. The use of labels falls away with acceptance, embracing the real, the complete, the totality. So we have to deal with these issues. And it's kind of overwhelming. We have the karmic, which is huge. Then we have this unlocking all these compartments that we've locked away, things that flew in the face, that contradicted a self-image that we were trying to perpetuate. Then we have to discard the self-image. And then we have to start being able to entertain the previously unentertainable, that opposites are the same. And it's the relief, I think, it's the relief of all this effort, or all this effortlessness. Again, there's the opposite, each equally so. Tremendous effort, tremendous effortlessness. And this is all training to prepare yourself to be big enough, inclusive enough, understanding enough to entertain at first, to accept, and then to live in this unity, this non-divisive, this inseparable wholeness. And I think after all of this, I know in my case, that's why I laughed. And I've heard it called the cosmic laugh, and I said, well, what could be funny? And what could be funnier? Once you've then it's just a simple, all of a sudden, it's an aha moment. It's all of a sudden, oh, that wasn't so hard, which belies the fact that there may have been years and years and lifetimes of effort to get to that state where you realize once and for all, aha, that wasn't so tough. That's pretty obvious. How could it be any other way? These are the questions, still questions, but these are the questions that you'll be entertaining. And it's the relief, at least I found it so, that made me laugh. And I mean, I laughed loudly, out loud, for hours, maybe even a day. But I've shared that this laughter, again, is one polarity. I found myself weeping, unconsolably weeping. So from a deep belly laugh to a forlorn, lonely weeping, and the weeping that would escalate into sobbing. And in my case, maybe I didn't hold on. Maybe it lasted just as long as the laughter, but I found it morphing back into laughter because the sorrow, the wailing, was a catharsis. It was burning the last remnants of resistance. It was, of course, as always, the most important part of the process was complete and total surrender. Surrendering up what you've held so close and dear, surrendering to the inevitable, and another surrendering any remnants, any inkling of a spiritual ego, that most dangerous, insidious, post-awakening development in your baby Buddhahood, where you have to discard any sense of exceptionality, any sense of accomplishment, any sense that would make you better than anyone else, and surrender to the ordinariness of your state of being, of your accomplishments. We can say, you've accomplished an ordinary state.